Hello, darkness, my old friend. We've come to talk to you again. Welcome into Snow The Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's podcast, the Players podcast, the Prognosticators podcast. And if we could, we would use a licensed song in a time like these, and it'd be and I'm free falling. Yes, I'm free falling.
Hey, Russ, can I stop you for just 1 second?
Yeah, what's up, Buttercup?
You sound like you have no voice.
I have some voice.
How much screaming was there at WrestleMania last night?
There was a lot of screaming. There was a lot of screaming. I saw people were very critical of the night one crowd. Guys, it was like, you know how it is when you go to an Eagles game and it's super cold, and you kind of expect it and you kind of bundle up expecting it. A lot of the people who showed up there last night, you could tell, aren't used to the link at this time of year. They were not ready for how cold it was going to get last night, but that was wild. First time I've ever gone to a WrestleMania. I wasn't going to go. I went into the whole weekend just saying, like, no chance. The tickets were too expensive. And then yesterday, my wife looked at me and she was like, get tickets. You have to go to WrestleMania. So she and I went last night. It was a lot of fun. I'll tell you what, it was a lot more fun than whatever the fuck you guys had to watch with the game last night. I'll be fully transparent here. I did not watch a minute of Saturday's game. I have no intention of watching it because, guys, it is rinse, repeat. The Flyers lose back-to-back games, a weekend where they needed at least 3 or 4 points realistically, a weekend that has now seen the Pittsburgh Penguins, who I talked about a month ago, 2 months ago. You just don't bet against that trio. Now the Penguins are back in it. The Caps are in it. The Islanders are in it. The Flyers failed to put their foot on the throat of the Islanders last week. They fucked this whole thing up. We are going to get into it, but this is not a good situation, and the Flyers have 4 games left to maybe try to make the playoffs or to figure out whatever the hell is going on, because there are some serious concerns. There are some serious questions. People are upset, and I think they actually have the right to be this morning on a beautiful Sunday or whenever you listen to this in the podcast feed. But before we get there, I want to introduce the men who everybody's here to hear from. First of all, in the middle, man in the middle, Anthony SanFilippo on Twitter, at @SanPhilly. How are you doing, fella?
Yeah, well, it was a hell of a game last night, Russell. It was a hell of a game the night before, and a hell of a game the game before that, and the game before that, and that makes 8 in a row. Well, it's going to be 8.
No, and that's not a prediction; it's a spoiler.
No, I know it feels like it's been 18. I mean, this team has just hit the wall for a lot of reasons, and there's a lot of things that we can break down about this team. I have about 5 that I think are the major points to get to, and we'll get to them in this episode. But yeah, I mean, if you thought losing 5-1 at home to the Blackhawks was rock bottom, there was more. And losing 6-2 to the Blue Jackets, you get the games in Columbus, but giving up all 6 goals to defensemen. Only the second time in the history of hockey that's happened. Bundy, you had to be thrilled with seeing a game like that, right? Bunch of defensemen scoring goals.
That's great. That's crazy.
Right?
Crazy.
I mean, 6 goals by defensemen in a game only happened twice in the history of hockey. And last night was one of them. So, I mean, that's where you go. That's where it hits. I think it hits rock bottom. I think even if you lose out, it doesn't matter at this point if you lose out. The game last night was the coup de grace if they miss the playoffs.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that, and just a miserable weekend. Like, I mean, even the game, and I really felt like Friday night they did a lot of good things. They really did. They played well at times. They had a 6-5 shot advantage or something crazy. They had a lot going for them. They just could not score goals at opportune times to give themselves a lead in that game. And then Buffalo came down and they scored some goals that put things out of reach, really. But the Flyers have had really a brutal time scoring goals. It's almost like the stuff that went on during the year. We had a lot of heroics and a lot of guys stepping up. It's like they just lost every bit of gas left, and it's almost like a NASCAR race, like a 500-mile race, right? Where you're going around and around, and it almost feels like the pit boss or the crew chief is like telling the car, like, you know what? I don't know if you have enough gas to make it the last 6 laps to win this thing, but we're gonna try. and the car ran out of gas on the last lap. And
Yeah.
that's exactly like what happened. And so it was a gamble. There's a lot of calculations, guys. We can jump into them, and a lot of miscalculations on this. I don't know. I wish this team would have just kept playing and just didn't have the noise it had to deal with. There was just a lot of noise the last 6-8 weeks that I don't think anybody needed. But this is where they're at right now, and it's very, very deflating. Like, I feel very deflated because it's been such a good year, and we were spot on. I mean, I thought they did a good job in those 7 games, Anthony, we talked about, but I certainly didn't fucking think they were going to, like Russ, like lose to Chicago, spanked by Columbus, just can't find a way to win a game. I mean, here they are again, 7 in a row. I mean, they could lose 10. They could.
Oh, they could lose 11, right?
Yeah.
The way I see it, Bunny, and you made a good comparison there with the race car, and I'm going to give you another race one. There was a Bundy bomb in there. Russ missed it. That's all right.
My daughter just tried to break. My daughter just tried to break into the office while we're doing this, so I apologize here.
That's all right. There you go. I have a story coming out on Crossing Broad today, kind of looking at what went wrong with the Flyers, and I compared them to a horse race, Bundy, where it's when you're on the longer track, like Belmont Park, for example, right, where it's 1.5 miles, okay, and they're like a speed horse. They get out early, they set the pace, and you're kind of like a little bit surprised because they're kind of a long shot. And maybe you put that long shot into one of your bets, and you're like thinking for a moment, "Oh man, maybe this can hit. Maybe I can get this to the end." And then all of a sudden, over the last last half, whatever, however many furlongs it is on the back end, like all of a sudden the thoroughbreds behind them just come blowing past you, and you're like, "Oh, what happened? What happened to that horse? It was doing so well, and they just didn't have the closing speed, right?" And that's really what I compared this to, because I think that's what this team was. And we could go back and Russ can find it if he ever had the time to go back and look at some of our episodes from November and December, where we sat on this very show, Bundy, and we said the Flyers are playing a style of play now that is usually reserved for after the deadline. In that important, there's 3 seasons in hockey, right? There's the regular season, which is opening night up till the trade deadline. Then there's the real regular season, which is these 20 games from the deadline to the end of the year. And then there's the playoffs. And they were playing like this, like you're supposed to be playing now, then. And we kept saying, this isn't sustainable. This you can't play this way for 82 games. It just is not going to work. You're going to burn yourselves out. And I think that's kind of where they went. I think that's what happened. They kind of burned themselves out. You keep hearing, well, they're spent, they're tired. It's whatever. I get it. It's because of how you had to play. And it was a debate where they said, do we play this way now and get ourselves into position and cross our fingers and hope at that point, or do we just abandon the season? Right, it's count it up as a missed opportunity or a missed season, and we'll get better down the road. They gave it a shot, and it's not worked out. They're fading badly here down the stretch.
Yeah.
So I have a thing that I want to throw at you guys, and I don't know when the right time to do it is, so I'm gonna throw it out now. And I had this idea in my head that I was gonna get really worked up, and I was probably gonna yell on the show. And Ant might get it out of me, but as of right now, I don't really have the intention of doing it. But I want to kind of take a macro view, because it's really easy to get lost in the moment. And there are a lot of things that we do have to get into about like why the wheels have fallen off. But let's go macro view for a second. If I had told you at the beginning of the season that the Flyers, who said they are rebuilding and are not competing for a Stanley Cup, if I told you that the Flyers are going to be a bubble team that are going to miss the playoffs, that are going to end up with a middle of the first round pick, they will have to trade away their top stateside prospect who doesn't want to play here, perhaps didn't want to play for the coach, but definitely didn't want to play here. They were going to trade him for a defenseman who re-injures the same shoulder that cost him significant time in the past. They were going to bring over two goalies from the KHL, one that they thought was lost to them in Fedotov, one of them that they expected to get at some point in Kolosov. They were going to lose their starting netminder to the Hockey Canada scandal that I think everybody kind of knew that they were internally preparing for the possibility. If you had all of that and you said in the macro view of rebuild and you're going to end up with a middle of the first round pick and miss the playoffs, would you have been happy with that? Because I can tell you that I would not have been. And unfortunately, despite the fact that they were trending in the playoff direction and despite the fact that they started really well and they outperformed expectations and all that, I said the worst thing that you can do if you are a rebuilding team is end up in hockey purgatory. And yes, they got a first-round pick for Sean Walker, which is great. They decided not to move a Nick Seeler. They decided not to move a Scott Lawton twice when offered high picks. Ultimately, if what you got out of this season is a middle of the first-round pick, that's not good. That is a Chuck Fletcher outcome. That is no different. Macro sense, don't get lost in the emotion of it. It's no different than what has happened in a lot of years here.
Well, that's the problem with you sometimes, Russ, is you look at things only from the macro sense. You don't look at things in the specific. Okay? And when you look at the things in the specific, everything that has happened for this team, for these young players to participate in this kind of season and play these games, sometimes you have to have hard lessons in sports. And this is a hard lesson for them, and they have to learn it. And this is a good thing for them to be. And there was no better year to have this happen. I'll be honest with you. I would be more on your side if this was what happened next year or the year after, okay, than this year. Because we all know this is not a great draft coming up. So it's not like you're going to go out there and get some next level superstar, Connor McDavid, Eric Bedard, even a Matvei Mishkov, if you tanked for this year. Like, it wasn't, that player's not out there. Okay. I know everybody's going to sit there and say Celebrini, he's fine. He's okay. All right. He's going to be a good player, but he's not going to be a generational player. Right. So that's my point. If there was a season where you have all your young players playing meaningful games in the NHL and you don't make it and you end up in the middle of the round anyway, this is the season to have that happen because it's the beginning of the rebuild. It's okay. I'm all right with what happened this season. I really am, and I think in the end they'll look back at this year and say this was a pretty good year. This was a pretty good year in the development of these players. And I think Torts said it really well in that after that Islanders game. Maybe the team didn't want to hear it, but the reality of it is they find out a lot about certain guys, and there are certain players on this team who you're going to look at and say, we thought they were a prospect. We thought they might be something. And then they went into games where it mattered more and they just wilted. And maybe that's not the kind of player we need on this team. And they found out about a few guys, right, Bundy?
Yeah, well, it's really a weird one because I was thinking about it last night. Like, how do you can't shoot any one part. I mean, a lot of people are going to look at Torts the last couple months and make, deduce whatever went on with Coots and everything. But it's weird. Like, it's a weird year because I know what people are going to say. Like, they're going to say, Jesus Christ, the Flyers are going to miss, and they're going to fucking pick 17th, which is purgatory in the NHL, and they've been there, right? But imagine if they didn't put the work in, if they just had some dog and pony show in here. So this is the part where I'm defending Torts, where I'm saying, like, if you had some guy in here that just didn't really give a fuck, like said, I'm just going to coach a team. I'm not going to raise the bar. I'm going to leave it how it is. Let guys develop on their own. Then you're probably in 22nd or 24th place in the league based on your talent level. But we've said for 2 years, going back to 2 summers ago, Torts is going to raise the bar of players. He's going to make your team better than it looks and better than it is. And we've seen that. And he's done an amazing job of that. He really did through the year. But you've got to find a way to pace that over 82 games. And I just felt like the last 2 months, for some reason, there was stuff that went on. Instead of worrying about just playing hockey, there was a lot of other things going on that get into guys' crawl space in their head. And I don't think that that's necessary. I thought the buttons were already pushed. Like, I think Torts did a great job of getting guys to buy in this year, to to take on teams that they weren't supposed to beat, find success, have success at times, and they've gone through a lot. Like the goaltending stuff was tough. They've gone through, having to make decisions at the deadline, like a Sean Walker, which has hurt them. There's no doubt it's hurt them. But this is a case now with the Flyers team, when you look at them and you have to reevaluate them as you move into the off season. And again, this season's not over. They could miraculously go win 4 games. I don't think it's happening, but it could. They're now in 5th in the Metro, if I'm not mistaken, Anthony, just looking at what it was. But I know there's a way that they're like Anthony's optimistic and positive. I think there's a lot of great experiences guys got this year. But I'm also not going to say that every single person that we felt was salvaged is necessarily the right decision. They have to go back into what the plan was beginning of the year. This is what happens, and we said this. When you have Torts, he can give you the appearance that you have something that you may not have. He raises
your floor.
But what happens is when you raise guys' level like that, if you're not a stud player, like a guy that can play and handle those every single game, it's not going to look good. And so you need a guy who can play 500 games in his career, or 800 or 1,000, that's going to be consistent and know when to put that push in. The problem is that I think under him, guys play out of fear. And I don't think necessarily, I think it's okay to play out of fear a couple times a year, but to not feel that every single night is a problem. And that wears on guys. Like, when I joke about like Hitch or other coaches, or you hear guys talk about it, I don't say it because Hitch is a guy that is not a hockey knowledgeable guy. He's a great X's and O's coach. He knows the game. But fuck, he wears guys out. And I'm sorry, but when you get in, and that was back then, that's when guys would actually listen to their coach because we were taught. Now you get fucking guys come in and like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. And so it reverberates through a lot of things that affect what your team is and what you want to do moving forward and how that looks. Like if you just look at the Flyers right now and you're an agent and you haven't dealt with Danny and you got a good free agent who's 29 and he's out there, he's going to make money. The first thing he's going to look at is how's the team? Who's the coach? Are they developing? And yeah, the coach has done a good job, but has he already worn out that work welcome that he's put into players? Like, he's made guys accountable, but I'm telling you, that doesn't happen for 3, 4, or 5 years with a guy like this, because it's impossible. Guys will tune you out because he tries to get the most out of you in the time frame that he is. And that's coaching. He said it last week. He's like, he said to me, if you don't like me here, then I'm probably not your coach. But there's a give and take with it. The problem is that he took, they gave. Now there's nothing left to give anymore. And that's a lot. And he said it the other day, this stuff follows him around. It's a give and take, but it's a very, very difficult give and take because we wish that this was, I don't even mind if the team fell apart like after the regular season and had a bad playoff run. At least they got there.
Yeah,
right. So what I'm saying is, I'll just finish quickly, is that there's so much going on because you're thinking to yourself, Jesus, like we played so well that we were right there on the playoffs doorstep. And we bought into what Torts was doing, the Danny and Jonesy did, said we got to leave it be because guys are playing well. I understand what some people are going to say. Well, this, they couldn't sustain it. And now we're going to pick 17th and we got this, and that. And there's so much aggravation and frustration. I understand it from the fan standpoint. We're here. Wow, the guy got us here. Oh, fuck. They're out of gas. They were picked apart late down the stretch. The goaltending situation screwed them. The captaincy thing, for some reason, I don't want to get into it. Something went on there. Like, I mean, I don't know what, but there was some fucking thing that went on. And you could just take a look at the schedule and then look after that whole Coots captaincy thing. And it's a whole different look to what the team
It was a temporary bump.
That's self-created and unnecessary.
I mean, we've talked about the unnecessary gambles. And like, I think the thing that drives me nuts, Bundy, is like, and you're spot on. If you look at the beginning of the year, teams were starting their backup goalies against this team a lot because it was a bad team. It was viewed on paper as a bad team. So the Flyers kind of benefited from that. They picked up some wins where maybe they shouldn't have early on. And if you look at over the course of the year, did they have times where they earned wins that they probably didn't deserve? Or like did they outplay the opposition because hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work? Yes, it happened a lot this year. The thing that's so frustrating, and the thing that like we just look, there are a lot of fucking stupid people. Okay, we all know it. And there are a lot of stupid people who are really vocal on social media because they pray at the altar of torts. And like you can do that, but like you will get burned because there's a reason he hasn't won a cup in 2 decades, okay? There's a reason that this act runs thin the way that it does and has run thin in every place he's been. And he gets the most out, but then he leaves. He fucking burns the field down. And when he leaves, there is often wreckage left where he was. And he, did he get the most out of some of these young guys? Yes, there were times that like he played mind games with Morgan Frost, and then Morgan Frost came back and he like goes to the office and rah, rah, rah. You're like, great. It worked. Awesome. He's gotten a lot out of Tippett before Tippett got hurt, and like there have been stretches. He really gave Forster a lot of leeway, which he typically doesn't do with a young guy. And sometimes that's worked and sometimes it hasn't. The problem here is in doing what he does and how he did it. The whole thing with John Tortorella is he's supposed to be this guy who can get the most out, right? And he did all season. But when it became nut crunching time, when it became the time to put the foot on the throat of the Islanders and some of these other teams you're competing with and to solidify that playoff spot, this is where he's supposed to be the guy. This is where he's supposed to galvanize the team. And unfortunately, I think he tried that with the Coots benching. And while some of the mouth-breathing dipshits on Twitter are like, well, Coots sucked anyway. What does it matter? It does matter. And yeah, there was a very short-term gain, but it's not a fucking coincidence here that they've lost 7 games in a row. The Coots scratching was probably part of it. The inability to find a backup netminder who could actually, relieve Sam Ersson was a problem, whether it's that they didn't go after anybody at the deadline, whether it's they overrated what Fedotov would be able to do when he came over. There's a lot here. And like, it's okay for people to be upset that they got so much. And then when it actually became time to like make the fucking playoff push at the end of the season, they didn't do it. They came up small. They've wilted. Where else do you point the finger?
There's a lot of places to point fingers.
There really are. Big mixed bag of shit. It really is. It's a whole
like, I don't want to, and again, I don't want it to be like, this is all Torts' fault. I don't think it is. There are a lot of things. This is like the ultimate, like 2 things can be true. There's like 7 things that can be true. But like, there are many things. And I think that too many people right now are trying to like siphon this down to one thing. And I think that's part of the problem.
No, there's not. You can't siphon it down to one thing. I mean, we haven't even talked about goaltending, really. I mean,
which we definitely
on the periphery, it's been mentioned. But I mean, when you really break it down, they've allowed, I think it's 62 goals since the trade deadline, which is I believe is either the most in hockey or second most in hockey. And that's an issue, right? And when you look at it, is it a situation where Ersson wasn't ready for the big stage? Well, certainly he wasn't. But was it because his skill set wasn't ready, or he just wasn't used to playing? It was too soon to give him this much responsibility. Obviously we talked a while ago about the book being out on shooting high glove on him. He got a little bit better at that, and then all of a sudden the team said, okay, now we're going to keep shooting high glove, but we're going to put traffic in front of him. And that's when it really went south for Sam Ersson. He really doesn't do a good job adjusting to that traffic, and that shot gets those shots that are getting through to that top left corner of the of the net, and they're going in. And I think that when you have that situation where you don't trust you lose faith in your goalies as players, and Bundy, you could talk about this more than anybody, right? When you have goalies who can't make that big save for you, that's deflating to a team. That's deflating to the players, right?
So I mean, you're fucking telling me.
That's what I'm saying, right? You're a guy who can speak to this. So, like, to me, I think that's, if you're looking at reason number one, it's the goaltending situation. It's not the only, obviously not the only reason, but to me, that becomes part of the problem. When you are saving less than 80% of your shots during a losing streak, that's a major issue. Okay, and it has a trickle down effect through that lineup. This Flyers team used to be blocking shots with reckless abandon. Right, beginning of the season, we talked, and again, that was part of this isn't sustainable. You're going to wear out your bodies doing it. So we said it. Okay, are they blocking shots as much now?
No.
And why? And why?
Because it's part of the buy-in,
right?
Like buying into what you're doing and staying with it. But yeah, that's a team thing. That's a thing. That's how you bind your team together. That's why Sealer, was such a good looking team guy, and he still is. But that's why, because those are things that bring everybody else into it. When you do hard and tough things like that.
Well, Bundy, a lot of people are saying, did Torts lose the room? I don't want to I'm not going to put you on the spot there because you're not in the locker room with these guys right now in the capacity that you used to be. You do talk to the people, you talk to a lot of these guys, but just in general, if the message is wearing thin and you do start to see the block shots are down and it does look like they're not maybe giving as much as they had, is it based on what you're seeing right now, is this just a matter of these guys are physically worn out because they were ridden into the ground? Or could it be more of we gave this guy everything we had, and now the shit that you were willing to put up with as a player through 70 games, just not willing to anymore?
Yeah, well, it's funny. And last night, we were picking the games, I really felt like last night was the last gasp.
Yeah.
I had serious doubts about last night. I felt like what happened last night, I actually hoped wouldn't happen. But I'm not going to lie and tell you, it's the first time all year that I really thought the Flyers were in trouble. And I picked them last night, because I really felt that was their last gasp. And I felt like after the Buffalo game where they did so many good things, that's deflating as hell when you don't score, when you get beat like that in a game that, as I said, all roads led to this weekend. It all came right down into that. And it was a miserable fail. But I think the game Friday night was just sucked the life out of them afterwards, and they went into Columbus with less than fumes. I meant to ask you guys, I just think about this. Was that Lexell and Ginning's first goals last night?
Yes, it was. Both scored their first NHL goals in the same
what
game.
are the odds of that? One team had 6 defensemen score, and 2 guys on the other side had first goals.
Yeah. It was an unbelievable result. It's one of those things that may never happen again in hockey. That's how ridiculous.
It's almost like the hockey gods are telling you, you're not fucking ready yet. So we're gonna give the 2 guys who've never scored a goal here late in the year against Columbus. But we're on fumes. It's just weird. Hockey's weird. It's such a weird sport. But I say that now. I'm not shocked at last night's result. I'm not.
Yeah, I don't think that I honestly don't think the players quit on the coach. I don't. I don't. I'm not saying.
I guess it's not quit. It's just maybe they pulled back a little bit.
Well, I mean, look, you don't. They played their asses off in that gauntlet against those seven games. They really did. I mean, they got 6 points out of it. They could have had more, right? They played some really, really good teams and played as well as they could. And I think what happened is that after that, it was almost like there was a sense of, all right, we got through it. And then, they lost to Montreal. Oh, shit, we lost at home to Chicago. And then it starts to get into their heads, maybe we don't belong here. Right? Maybe we're not supposed to be here. Maybe everybody was right about us all along. And I think that was part of what Torts' press conference was after not the one after the game against the Islanders, but the next day at practice or 2 days later at practice, when he was saying, he looked at it and he's like, look, I got more concerns than I had originally. And then he starts going off about how it's like, we're here. Don't listen to anything else. We're here. And I think that that's really what it came down to. It's just that this is a group that doesn't know how to win right now. They just don't know how to in these important games. It takes another level to play in these games, right? Maybe they felt like they gave their most. They reached their peak. Maybe they felt like they got there, during those 7 games, and that was as far as they could possibly go. And then that wasn't good enough. They certainly needed to go further. And they just did like, well, we can't. We're giving all 150%. And then Torts is like, the one thing I haven't done, he said I've done a shitty job, is getting them to that next level, getting them to believe that they can dig deeper and find more, right? And I think that's a very real assessment of this team as a whole. Look, the power play has sucked all year long, but the penalty kill went south. It's one of the worst in hockey since the trade deadline, right? It completely went away. They stopped blocking shots again because it's like they've worn themselves out. And yes, you can sit there and say that was part of the coach. That's partly on the coach because you wore them out to get to this point, and they got nothing left to give you, as Bundy said. Certainly, and that can certainly be a criticism of Torts for the way things have gone. But the reality of it is I don't think that this is a group of players who quit on him, which I think that narrative is out there, and I think that that's a little bit too much. I think that goes too far.
I agree with you, Anthony. It's like I said, like with Hitch, right? Let's talk about like Hitch.
Yeah.
Like guys, no one ever quit on Hitch. Like good coach, like we want to win. You want to go out and play and perform. I just feel like even with Hitch, because I can say this, he just wears you the fuck out.
Oh, sure.
You just get worn out, like everybody. So I'll give you an example. I'm at a function last night at the Meadowlands up in North Jersey, New York. There, right it was a racetrack event, and I was with Grant Marshall, former Devil, and Ron and New York Ranger legend Ron Greshner. And I don't say anything. Like they know I'm with the Flyers. And it was like we had Rangers, Devils, Flyer representation. It was like an autograph signing and a meet and greet. It was a good time. Really good guys, Mark Grant and Gresh, great guys. But even them, like they had a couple Ranger people, and they're looking like, "Hey, is Torts worn you guys the fuck out yet?" And I'm like, "Well, you don't wear me out because you don't talk to us." So I said, "I'm fine with it." But that's the kind of stuff like you get people that remember him. Like, and they went with Gresh because he works for the team. But it's not like, "Hey, how's everything going with John? Are you enjoying him as your coach?" It's like, no, they come to me like I could be like the nicest. They may not know me, the sweetest person in the world. Like, hey, how's Hitch or how's fucking Torts doing? Is he worn you guys out yet? It's like that's the kind of stuff that people know elsewhere, right? That you get, but I don't believe that they quit on him. I just think that there was a lot of bullshit that the team had to deal with that I don't know how you couldn't say was there while it was part of the game of hockey. Like they were just rolling, just keep rolling. And I feel like there was too many things the last 6 weeks that were just unnecessary.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. I do think that for all the right buttons he pushed early in the year, I think he pushed some wrong ones in the last 6 weeks. There's no question in my mind. I like we talked about it on Press Row. I'm not sitting here trying to defend everything he's done. I think that the scratching of Coots was a gamble that they did not need to take, and they failed. It failed them. It certainly failed them. But at the same time, I'm not going to say the players play, right? A coach can only do so much one way or the other. A coach could only help you succeed to a certain point, and it can only fail to a certain point, right? There's a lot that has to go into players that are on the ice as well. And I think, there's a couple other things that you got to take into consideration. I mean, Konechny's playing through an injury that's going to require some kind of repair in the offseason. Okay. I mean, and so he's not the player that he was before the injury. Right. And you got other guys who I think have not I think we have frozen Bundy, Russ.
Bosey's front. There he is.
What
Bundy
the fuck is going on here?
There he
we
is. All right, now he's good
Bundy.
now. That was a great face, though. Maybe we'll put that on a shirt.
But I think that there are other players that are concerning to me. Like, first of all, the offense has never been great all season, but it has completely gone AWOL here down in these last 7, 8, 10 games. I've been disappointed with Joel Farabee big time, and I thought that he was going to be a player that was going to be a guy who had a nice season, and he was having a decent season, right? But he kind of went away. I kind of thought Owen Tippett kind of disappeared after he was going so well for so long. And I don't know, does he hit a wall? Maybe, his first real full season as a go-to guy. He hasn't been great either. I think Morgan Frost has had some points, but I think he's also not played the way you need to play at the end of the season as well. So he's kind of been a slightly disappointing player as well. I think that there's been a lot of that. And you're kind of looking at that and saying, well, what are these guys going to be going forward? Are these guys that you want part of your team when it's good again? And I'm not certain that, Tippett, yeah, obviously he is. I just think that he kind of, he got the injury, and then, I think he just lost his momentum and hasn't been the same since. And obviously Konechny, I think he's going to be part of it. He's got an injury, but there's a couple other guys I look at and say, maybe not with these guys. Maybe they're not part of it. And that, that's going to be part of what happens in the offseason when you reassess this team.
There's also the part of it where you say, and like, it's a real conversation. And again, the mouth breathers are going to get their panties in a bunch about it, or their undies. But like, this coach isn't the coach. This isn't the long-term coach. So before you make some of these personnel decisions, is it really the right thing to do to start offloading some of these guys in the offseason? Where, like, obviously there's gonna be roster turnover. But do you make a call on some of these guys based on how they played for John Tortorella? Or, like, do you wait for the offseason? Like, look, if this ends, the running joke has been, hey, Torts avoided the 10-game losing streak. Guess what, buddy? They still have a chance. All right? Like, they're still they could get to an 11-game losing streak if they really wanted to end the year. And like, they're not beating New York. Washington is probably still going to have a lot to play for, and the Devils are also going to be like a team that wants to play spoiler. Hey, Montreal, at least you can beat Montreal. Oh, wait. So we kind of take that. But again, the mouth breathers are going to get really upset about it. But like, I don't think that this guy is the coach when they flip the switch. I don't think any of us do. So why would you even go into next season with this coach on the bench and make some of these personnel decisions? Like, does it make sense to perhaps make the change behind the bench and get an evaluation from another set of eyes? Whether it's Brad Shaw as an internal hire, who I think has done a very good job with guys on the blue line, especially this year. Does he get a look? Does a Craig Berube, who's been out there, who has not taken a job despite there being interest from other teams? Is there another coach that breaks free? I'm not advocating for a Mike Babcock or a Joel Quenneville, but those are names that are out there that will be thrown around with any coaching vacancy. Like, Ant, I'll throw it to you. Can you rationalize making a move on any of these younger guys that might be part of something, or that you might feel like aren't the right guys because of how they played for Torts? Or do you say, maybe we do have to change the coach, and this will give us the double, triple verification that it isn't meant to be here?
I don't think that I don't think that what you're asking works from an evaluation point. I don't think you can sit there and say, oh, well, let's keep these guys and let's bring in a different coach and see if they still work. I think that Torts pushed them to a limit. And this is what they are. And you're finding out who they are. And whether you change coaches or not, I think you learned about these players.
Yeah,
so I don't think that there's I think they're mutually exclusive. I think you can make a change at coach, but you're not going to bring back players who you sat there and said, oh, well, maybe they'll be different under another coach. Oh no, if they couldn't play at being pushed the way they were pushed by Tortorella, they're not going to be part of the team in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know. It's I know a lot of people are calling on new coaches and everything, but we got Tort still has 2 years left, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't know exactly if what his plans are and everything. Craig Berube is going to the Devils game tonight. his family are Devils fans. I'm like, how did that happen?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the point is that look, if you think that Craig Berube would be the coach, like if you're Keith Jones and Danny Briere, I'm just saying Craig Berube, but it could be anybody. If you think that the coach that you want to get this team to be contenders is out there, you should consider it, right? Whether it's Craig Berube, whether it's Brad Shaw, whether it's somebody else, you should consider it. But not to say necessarily, I don't think that you're looking to fire John Tortorella. I don't. I think that there's, if that move is there, if it's out there, I would think it would be more find a way to keep him in some way in the organization and then go and get somebody else. Because this is not a fireable year for Torts. He's probably still going to be a Jack Adams finalist. Even if they miss the playoffs, he's probably a finalist for the Jack Adams Award. You don't become a finalist for the Jack Adams Award and get fired because you don't think that it's the right coach for the team.
Well, Billy Barber won it and got fired the next year.
Yeah, that was during the next year, though, right? It wasn't. They didn't fire him that off season. So yeah, I mean, you look at it and you say you got to figure it out. I mean, honestly, if this would have happened in year 3 for Tortorella, then I think it's easier to fire him. But because it was year 2, it's not that simple. So what will happen is, what would happen if you feel like that the better coach is there to come in here and bring him in, then you have to find a way to keep Torts too, because I think that's as bad a look for an organization when you talk about other, player free agents wanting to come here, et cetera, et cetera. That would show some instability. This team went from being a doormat and irrelevant to being on the cusp of making the playoffs in 2 years, and with this guy as coach. And you may not like him as a coach, but it's hard to miss what exactly he did, to help this team improve. If you're going to just suddenly sit there and say, not good enough, we're changing coaches again, that instability is also something that you don't necessarily want, unless there's something else that you say Torts has got another role with the organization. I think that's the easier way to thread that needle. If you're Keith Jones and Danny Briere.
I did put over on YouTube on the poll. This is why we like people to be over on YouTube, and I'm an idiot and I put the wrong years up, but it's fine. I'm sleepy. It should say, should John Tortorella be the Flyers coach for the 2024-25 season? I put 2023-24. As of right now, 61% of people who have responded say yes, he should be the coach next year. 38% say no. It just shifted on me. Now it's 63-37. Now I'm now forcing people into the poll. So 2/3 of the people watching right now who have participated in the vote believe that he should be the coach next year. Just throwing it out there as hypotheticals, guys. That's all it is. What else do you want to get into about this disastrous, god-awful disgrace of a 7-game losing streak? Should we get to the goaltending really quick here one more time? Like, did they make a miscalculation by not getting a veteran at the deadline?
But who were you getting? Like, that's the thing. Like,
there was Ronta available, right?
I mean, you could have added
on
him
waivers.
I mean,
I'm just saying. That's one.
Yeah, I mean, again, were you going to bring in another guy with a contract? Then you have to make those contract gymnastics work for a guy to play 4 games for you. I
mean, you just pulled off some really elite level geopolitical workings to get Ivan Fedotov over here. Do you think that there's a chance that they overrated what Fedotov would be able to do short term? Like, do you think that they might have looked at it and said that they didn't think that the transition was going to be this drastic, and that he.
I have actually a tidbit on that.
Okay.
I told you, I played in Brian Prop's charity game yesterday, and sitting on the bench just talking with Mark Howe, Hall of Famer, and he's, of course, mentioned the goaltender.
Longtime scout too, by the way.
Yeah, former scout. Yeah, I mean, obviously he had a plethora of Russians in Detroit that he'd looked at, but he said his actual quote to me was, "If you think what you're getting right away is what it is, it's not." He goes, "It sometimes takes 4 to 6 months just to train these goalies of just how to compete in the crease area." So that gives you, I mean, like. I don't. You know me, guys. I don't pay any attention to goaltenders. I think they should stop every fucking puck that's shot at them. They should never let a single goal in. And if you don't, you're a fucking sieve. Get out of the net. Like I'm like that. Like fuck off. Stop the puck. I don't want to hear your bullshit about your head here or there. Just stop the puck. And that's really what I feel about goaltending at the end of the day. So maybe I give you another layer of my depth. But that comes from a guy that knows hockey, player development guy, and just an interesting tidbit. So yeah, the Flyers had nothing else that they could put in that game the other night except for Ivan Fedotov, and at times he looked extremely awkward, but he just looked like a guy, to be honest with you, that was just trying to learn what was going on with something like that. So I don't know. Maybe it's a tough situation. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it and I say, do I think it was a desperation move? I don't. I think it was a situation where it was like, well, shit, we have nothing else to lose at this point. Let's just give it a shot and see. We don't have any expectations, and like Tort said, I mean, when he put him in, he said, I put him in a hell of a spot, and he certainly did, right? And he answered the call in that Islanders game. He did. He played well. But the reality of it is that you got to just you can't just expect a guy who's never played in the NHL to come in the middle of a playoff race and just suddenly be good. like you just can't expect that, right? So anyway, it is what it is. The goaltending situation is not the greatest right now. It's what it is. I mean, they were damaged by the Carter Hart situation, and they knew it was going to come at some point. They just didn't know it was going to happen in the middle of the season. I think they kind of thought it was going to happen before the season, which would have changed this whole season, right? Let's imagine you want to talk about hypotheticals and look at things from a high level and go back in time kind of thing, Russ. Let's just imagine that whole Hockey Canada thing happened in August and September, like everybody thought it was going to happen, and you went into the season without Carter Hart to start the year, to play half the year, to get the team off to the start that it did. Are we having this same conversation today? Is this team anywhere close to the playoffs today? I argue no, because Cal Peterson's probably on your team for much of the year, right? I mean, I'll be honest, that's why they brought him in here. Okay, so I mean,
right.
If we want to go back in time and think about it from that perspective, like they're probably never even close to playoff contention had Carter Hart not been part of the team for the first 3.5 months of the year. So that's the other thing too. That's why I say, like, you got to look at it on a much more granular level sometimes. And that's why I don't think this season is going to be looked at as a disaster at all. I think in the long-term part of a rebuild, this is ultimately going to be looked at as a season that had huge benefits for a number of players. And when I say number of players, I talk about guys like Cam York. I talk about guys like Tyson Forster. I talk about like guys like an Owen Tippett, even a Konechny, who's had a little bit of playoff experience in the past, Bobby Brink. Like, I think these guys who are going to be part of this team going forward, this is an important time of year for them and an important lesson for them to learn as they grow with this organization in the coming years.
I'm not going to sell it off like that in that quite way. Like, there's been a lot of good things. Anthony's right. But I'm not going to spin it and say that not making the playoffs is okay. It was either
it's never okay.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean you said that, but I'm just looking at like this is a disappointment if they don't make it, because all roads pointed to here. Every bit of success the team had, guys stepping out of their comfort zones to do things. And it wasn't all the time, but they did do it. So from that standpoint, the reward for that had to be the playoffs. It had to be for me. And that's why the push was on. And I think Torts realized it. Like, man, like we're here. Like he said last week, we're here. People may not like it or understand why, but we're here. And I think that not getting around to the playoffs is a really bad thing. Like a truly, truly detrimental and disappointing thing from where I'm looking at it from.
Bundy, would it be fair to say that it's, I want to be careful how I word it, because I know how Ant's going to get very flustered here in a second when I say it, all right? Like I know for a fact that he's going to get himself all worked up at the mere mention of it. But for as much as we talk about what good it is for players that they've been in this kind of run towards the playoffs, winning the right way, building culture, is it almost as detrimental to some extent, or does it take away some of the benefit of that race to fall apart the way they have over the last 7 games? Like, is there a risk that because of how this has happened and what could potentially happen here over the last 4 games, that a lot of those gains that you thought you made developmentally kind of fall by the wayside because it ended, and if it continues this way, it will have ended in a very ugly fashion?
Let me answer this right here. This is what Jim said, and I know what he's saying. It's true, but in the long run, it hurts the team by making by making the playoffs. So if you're going to pick 17th or you're going to pick 16th, who cares? I'd rather pick 16th and make the playoffs with that record than finish 17th and miss. Like what I'm saying is so that's why I say it's such a it sucks. It really, really does stink that they may not make it now. And I mean the road now, like they're 5th in the Metro now, I think, just based on like where the standings.
They pretty much have to win out. I mean, I know
and they only can get to 91 points. And I don't know if 91 is it. Like, like Tampa's already, I think, at 93 or something, or more
Tampa's,
than that.
Tampa's in.
Tampa's
in. It's a matter. It's the Islanders and the Penguins that you're chasing. One of those teams. It's probably Pittsburgh more so than the Islanders, because the Islanders, I think, have a 2-point lead or 2-point lead.
They do. They got 85 points.
Yeah.
And games in hand, they all have on the Flyers now.
That's the other. That's the thing. That's
killer.
That's the killer, right? That's why I said they pretty much have to win out. We said that it was so fascinating because Russ, you put all that stuff out there about the we nailed the 7-game prediction, right?
6 points, 6 points in
7 games, and we outlined exactly where those points were, et cetera, et cetera. Like that was pretty good by us. But that was with the assumption that they would play 500 over the last 9 games.
Of course.
Right? That was with the assumption that you played 500.
They were getting through the gauntlet, and they were going to get a bunch of, cupcake teams.
Yeah, they just had to play 500. They just had to get 9 points in 9 games, right? They've played 5 games and gotten 1 point.
Yeah.
1. That means that there's still 8 more you got to get, which is why I say they have to win all 4, because that would get you in. That would probably get you in if you win all 4 games. If you don't win all 4 games, you need a lot of help. And look, these other teams are not very good, right? I did this thing. Part of my story, I'm going to pull it up just so I can have the right details. With these teams that they're competing with, okay? The Penguins have played pretty good hockey.
6-2-2 in their last 10.
Since the deadline, the Penguins are 8-5-3, okay? Which is technically is 500, but from a points percentage thing, it's higher than 500. And their goal differentials +1, okay, in those games since the deadline. The Islanders are a -9 goal differential since the deadline. The Capitals are -13. The Red Wings are -15. And yet, as bad as those 3 teams are, the Flyers have a worse record and a worse goal differential since the deadline. Flyers 3-8-3, 9 points since the deadline, and they're a -28. They just had to be slightly bad, not completely bad, right? If they were slightly bad, the Flyers would still be in a playoff spot today. That's all it comes down to. You cannot lose every one of these games. And they did. They lost to a bunch of teams that they should not have lost to. Montreal, Chicago, Buffalo, Columbus. Those 4 games are the 4 that are going to really come back and haunt this team at the end of the season when you look back at it and say, All they had to do was win 2 of them. Win one or get points in those games, and you're in good shape.
Just for posterity's sake, you said they're minus 28 since the deadline?
In goal differential, yes.
And they're now minus 23 on the season. So they were plus 5 going into the deadline.
Correct.
Just to give people an idea of like how fast they've fallen off. Because if you remember, when we would like laugh at the Islanders, it was because the Islanders had a ton of loser points.
Yeah.
And the goal differential was shit. They now have the same goal differential, minus 23.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm going to say this too, and everybody can hate me for it. When I said that bet against Malkin, Crosby, and Letang at your own risk, well, the one thing that I always keep coming back to is even when Tampa doesn't look like Tampa, even when Boston at times hasn't looked like Boston, even when Pittsburgh hasn't looked like Pittsburgh, teams that have a championship pedigree, teams that have guys who have gotten to the point to lift that cup and not just be guys who are kind of hanging on to the coattails, but guys who actively contributed and were responsible for it. When it gets to nut crunching time, like now, those players step up. And I'll tell you what, shame on the Flyers for how this went down. And at the same time, this is another one of those things where like you look back at how the Flyers played Pittsburgh this year, and there were times that, remember there was a game, was it a month ago? The Flyers played the Penguins, and we're like, this is one. You maybe can kind of kill off the Penguins' hopes. Like you had them dead to rights, and then you didn't anymore.
Well,
and it feels like a lot of those times that the Flyers have been in position to kind of really give it to a team, break their spirit. If he dies, he dies. They haven't done it. And now it's almost like the ghost of Christmas past, right? Like the ghosts of metropolitan teams past. They're all just kind of popping up and passing you now.
I'm going to actually give you partial props on this, Russ, because, I mean, look, the fact is they've played 16. The Penguins have only won 8 of their last 16 games. It's not like they're the cream is rising to the top and all of a sudden these great players are carrying their team. But I will say they had a big game against Tampa yesterday, and it was a playoff atmosphere. They won that game 5-4. 4 of those goals were scored by Malkin, Crosby, and Letang. So partial credit for you. But let's not turn it into all of a sudden the Penguins are playing great hockey. They're +1 goal differential and they're a 500 hockey team since the deadline. It's not like they're running away with things here. So let's just
14 out of their last 20 possible points. It's not bad.
They're playing their last week and a half. They've played decent hockey. They've played really good hockey. Last week and a half. But that's only 7 to 10 days. It's not like we're looking at when you look at the whole where the Flyers collapse began. They're basically they're still just a 500 team. So we had a quick
there
chat.
was a super chat. I'll bring that up. And this is actually the guy I wanted to get to anyway. So thank you, Tony Louie, for the super chat. We appreciate it. You don't have to do that, but it's very kind when you do. Do you think Konechny folded under the pressure? You've mentioned that Konechny's been playing through an injury.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys
mentioned it on Press Row Show a bunch of times.
Yeah, he missed time with what the Flyers call an upper body injury. I have a sense of what it is, but again, because of you don't put out the injuries when they don't want them out there. I think that it is an injury that is very difficult to play through. He got some treatment to try and gut it out, and is trying to gut it out. It is not an easy injury to play through. Bundy knows the injury that I'm talking about, and I think he can probably confirm that it's not an easy injury to play through. And he's giving it as best he can. But I would tell you that at another time of the year, if he had this injury, he would have probably gotten the procedure done and missed extended time. But because it was right before the deadline here, and right before the playoffs here, he's trying to play through it. So I don't think that I think that I think he's fine, and I think he'll be part of this team for a long time to come.
Yeah. I mean, they got a lot of things I got to check out in the off season, but again, I'm still gonna I don't like where they're at, but I'm still holding out hope in 4 games. I mean, it's been a long year. They've surprised us when they haven't, but it's been just a disappointing weekend, just brutal. It really was. I mean, it's probably the lowest I've felt all year. It's been a lot of highs. That's what you hate. There's been so many good things. You just hate to see the wheels come off like this late in the year.
Yeah, I mean, I have one other just tactical question. I'm just wondering if maybe it had something to do with some of what we've seen here. Right? Beginning of the season, and then it continued for a while. And the coach actually did talk about it a lot. Going 11-7 as much as he did this year, it's taxing. It can be taxing on forwards. Could that have contributed to part of the breakdown and part of the losing of the gas, if you will?
No.
I mean, no. Okay.
No, it didn't matter. They just figured that because they didn't want to have a certain. That was the lineup he went with. I don't know why it was a lot, Russ, but he just felt like I don't like 11-7 is stupid. Someone says I don't like it because it just breaks up the flow in the game, but it had nothing to do with any kind of fatigue. This team is fatigued. Everybody's tired this time of year. It just comes at a point now where this team just can't score goals. They can't get to the places they were. If you notice some of the plays the other day, like they had shots in a lot of the games, but they didn't have a lot of net front traffic, a lot of net front chances where you're hacking and whacking and turning it into a mosh pit. Like we didn't see a lot of that. That's how you know a team's tired, when there's not another gear to drive into. And I feel like that's where the Flyers are right now. They're just stuck in first and they can't they can't get themselves out of that.
Okay. I think we've hit everything now. Is there anything that we missed? Let us know in the comments section. And while you're letting us know in the comments, hit the like button. If you're on YouTube right now, we love you and we appreciate you. We love and appreciate you so much that we did the show on a Sunday morning, kind of take a holistic view of what the hell has happened here. Hit that like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel. Last I looked, we were 10 subscribers short of 3,000. And there are very few things in this world that we get as excited for as when the YouTube channel that started last summer continues to grow. And we are very, very close to getting to 3,000. And it'll make me warm and fuzzy in my tum-tum. It'll make Anthony get a smile on his face like all those 5-star reviews back on iTunes back in the day when Ant used to get himself really hyped.
You owe people some reading of 5-star reviews, you know.
I think you're probably right. But before we get there, I want to make sure that people are doing their due diligence here. You gotta make sure that you're dropping those 5-star reviews because they do matter on the podcast apps, and you have to make sure that you hit the like button when you're on YouTube. And if you're on Facebook and if you're on Twitter and you're watching there, we love you. We appreciate you. If you're listening in the podcast feed after the fact, we love you. We appreciate you. Head over to YouTube, subscribe, and hit the like.
Go buy some WrestleMania tickets. I'll go with you tonight.
We're not going
Actually,
to
no, I won't.
Bundy.
Unless you buy them.
Dude,
go buy them.
No,
go use some of your contacts. Tell them you're doing a press show up there tonight. You need tickets.
Can I just like tell you this is the one thing that I hated last night? That sports complex, I get it. The Flyers and Comcast have their thoughts on what the Sixers are doing. Sixers have their thoughts. I don't really give a shit. Can someone please just fix the sports complex? Why is it so hard to get out? We walked around last night because we were all the way up. I was like, there's no point in rushing out of here. There's 72,000 plus people in the building. Like, there's no point in trying to rush out to the car.
The problem is the traffic patterns.
Yes,
coming in and coming out. Like they force you to go one way and one way only, and it's a disaster.
It was horrific last night, so bad that like we stopped at a few merch stands to try to find some stuff for our kids after the fact. Because again, I thought we would let the crowd kind of dissipate. We didn't get out of the parking lot last night until 1 o'clock. We didn't get home until after 2. So no, then we weren't out of the parking lot until, it was about 1. 1 is when we finally got out of the F lot. And then it was like another 40 minutes trying to drive around the casino. Because the little pass to go by E-lot to go up to 95, you do that real quick wraparound. Mm-hmm. There was something going on there, like 17 cop cars showing up there. Traffic wasn't moving, so we like kind of routed around. But like, that was a disaster. Absolute disaster zone. And it's not like everybody was just concentrated to one lot, right? It was all the Link lots. It was Wells Fargo lots.
Oh, yeah.
It was Citizens Bank Park lots. The fact that, like, listen, I don't care what happens with any of these arenas. We had Dan Hilferty on the show last summer, and he talked about how, like, they're looking at infrastructure and about widening some of the entrances and the exits. I need a ramp directly onto 95. Can we figure...
right from the Wells Fargo parking lot, yeah.
Can we figure something out? Please. I beg of the people. I beg of the billionaire class. Can we please just get an easy way to get out of the sports complex lot? That's it.
And the thing is like we're fortunate in a lot of ways because we don't have to. We arrive before most of the crowds, and we leave after most of them have left, so we don't really get to experience it. I didn't really get like first-hand experience until a couple years ago. I took my son to he's a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. I took him to a Eagles-Buccaneers game, right? I know. And I took him to the game, and we left home 2.5 hours before the game started. And I live 25 minutes from the arena, okay? We left 2.5 hours beforehand. We didn't get to sit in our seats until 2 minutes left in the first quarter of the football game because of how awful that whole traffic scenario was. Just a disaster.
So you guys come and talk to me next home game. I don't want to give away my parking secrets, but I have a way out. A way out and a way in. I am the trained professional because I go to Eagles games.
Yeah.
And I park at the Wells Fargo Center with my son. And I'm telling you, I have a little rhythm, boys. I can't share it with all of us because I don't want us all doing that in the parking lot.
It wouldn't be the thing.
I think I know what your little secret is there, Bundy.
We're gonna see like 600 Snow the Goalie people like all following going out the same way.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Everybody just gets their stickers from the table, puts them on their car. It's like a funeral procession, except it's a funeral for the Flyers. All right. Hey, before we head out, let's get to the 5-star reviews really quick. We do have a few. I don't know the last time we read some. I'm just going to go back to February really quick. We had JMWMDW said the best, 5 stars. Thanks for always being a place where me and my boys can come and listen to great Flyers and life talk. All the best, Mike. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
5 stars. Great podcast, says Bill from Northeast PA. I've been a long-time listener, and I've got to say that the quality of the podcast has not just gotten better with time, but has gotten significantly better. The information and insight you get regarding the Flyers is outstanding, and it's presented in an entertaining way. I look forward to each episode. Keep up the great work, and let's go Flyers. Thanks, Bill. We have one from north of the border. I can't believe it cleared through customs. Here we go. Gritty's biggest fan, 5 stars. One of, if not the best silly podcasts I have ever listened to. Thank you for blessing my ears with this masterpiece. Andy from Ontario.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
Blessing his ears. I love it.
Blessing his ears. One of, if not the best silly podcast. We appreciate that. It's great stuff. Anything else you guys want to...
That's south of the Arctic Circle, right?
Yeah.
That is, yeah.
And east of the Mississippi, right?
You said we should thank Torts, Bundy?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you... people identify us. Oh, you're the ones Torts has a beef with. That's us. That's us. Make sure you listen to us. Snow the Goalie. Best
silly podcast.
Was. I knew I'd get it out of here, Russ. I love it. That silly podcast.
Ant, is there anything you want to ask us on our way out?
Anything I want to ask you? You want to do another little? That's a bad setup.
No. I just want to know if there's anything I've asked you guys a lot on this episode.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Russ.
Sure.
Oh, I thought that was the setup.
No, I said I wanted to know if you have any questions for us.
Because I thought you were just going to hit me with, I'm not answering your questions.
I wouldn't do that to you. I'm not Torts. Do you have any questions for us?
No, I don't really have anything.
I just have one more thing from the concerned fan. Shot me a message.
Questions.
There we go.
There it is.
The concerned fan, Flyers Eric, his level of concern is a 10. Just to let everybody know.
Oh, yeah.
He wanted me to share that. Yeah. So
we're up to 10.
This is super fan Eric on the inside. Well, there we got all the sound drops in. I'm good. I'm ready to go. I'm ready.
That little clip makes me crack up every time. Just how you're staring into the camera, Bundy.
One more, Russ. Come on.
You know what? I think what I should have done is I should have.
What are you doing?
There was somebody before who they dropped a comment and they were like, Russ, can you do Trump challenging the results of the Flyers 2023-24 season?
We'll save that for when they're officially eliminated.
Yeah, then there's gonna be something great there.
I will say one more thing, guys. I'm with Grant Marshall last night, right?
Yeah.
And of course Marshall played for Hitch in Dallas, right? Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of his career. And I'm not going to get into any impersonations, but when you get a group of guys that played with him, I mean, the stories are all the same. You could just have the same team. It could be the Disneyland team, and it would be the same shit with Hitch every time. He does like his waddling walk. Marshy does it in this restaurant last night. I'm fucking dying laughing, right? Because I'm thinking to myself, I should have this guy in Snow the Goalie and do all the Hitch impersonations. Like, it's fucking classic. So we had a good laugh. But it's always the same stuff all the time. Good. It was Hitch. The stories never change. Never change.
That's great. What did Bundy say the other night, Russ, at the press row show, the last press row show that made us laugh? He said something. Oh my God, it was so good. We were completely unexpected.
Was I on the air?
Oh yes, we were talking about something that was happening.
It was on the air.
Oh my, yes, it was at the beginning of the. We'll have to look it up now. It was as soon as he came over. It was as soon as he came over, like off of the radio at the last home game. We got to look it up. We'll have it ready for the next episode because it's a clip.
You know, we have one other sound drop that I almost never use, and I should have used it today because I knew that this was going to be a heated episode. I should have let off the episode with this.
This is Dan Hilferty. Welcome to Snow the Goalie. You're in for a treat.
Because people were in for a treat today, baby.
Yeah,
Lots of thoughts. Now listen, let's be realistic here. We know how things are about to play out, schedule-wise at least. Obviously, we don't know what the results of the games are going to be. If we did, we would I don't know, we would, I guess, have proven that there's a script to the season. But the Flyers have 4 games remaining. They play again on Tuesday. It's their next game. They're at Montreal. They obviously need to win that game. Ant has now said that every game from here on out is a must-win. I wonder if maybe you can win 3 of 4, pick up another overtime point against the Rangers, and maybe squeak your way in. But guys, how do you see the last 4 playing out here? At Montreal, at New York, home against the Devils, home against the Caps. If we're being realistic here, how do you see this? Like, how many points do you think they can get out of this?
4 at most.
89's not going to do it. I mean,
yeah.
I just the way they're going. I mean, can they flip a switch and win 4? Watch us talk next week. They won 4 in a row.
Yeah.
I'm with Anthony. 4 points because I mean they both might be done. Like I thought the Washington game. Now everything's changed. Like I thought that would be a meaningful game. It may mean nothing. We'll see.
Yeah. The one thing, if you look, you're chasing the Penguins, right? I mean, you look at their schedule, what's coming up. I mean, they have a tough schedule. They play at Toronto Monday, then they come home for 3 against Detroit, Boston, Nashville, and they finish up at the Islanders. Talk about a game that could have some meaning the last day of the season. Penguins at Islanders could have a little bit of meaning as well. So they have 5 tough games left. I mean, not a one of them is going to be easy. So, I mean, the chance still exists, but I'm not confident, as I haven't been all year, right? I mean, we've said all along that this team was probably not there. They had a shot, they had a chance, but they just needed to do certain things and couldn't do them. Couldn't get it done. Still time, but it's unlikely at this point.
It's kind of brutal, guys. It is an
Adam
unfortunate
Bilkus
way
here
to
talking about Stallone. I actually know that my buddy Rick knows it too. The guy's name in the movie was Marion Cobretti. Sylvester Stallone.
Is that what Cobra?
Cobretti.
His name was Cobretti was his last name, and that's why he's called
Marion Cobretti. I don't know how I remember that. I'm thinking to
1980s.
myself, what was Stallone thinking?
1980s, man. Oh, Jesus. Can you imagine using that rationale to write a script for Hollywood today?
He called himself Cobra.
Cobretti. Oh,
that's a good way to end it right there. I love
it is. Yes, it is.
Cobra.
All right. Well, a big thank you to everybody who checked out the show live today. We had a very nice audience here on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. And I'm sure that we'll have a nice big audience over on the podcast feed as well. Guys, I hate how much 1 week swings things. Last week, I was saying to you guys, hey, you know what? Starting to have conversations with a few places about some live shows to do press road show for away games for the playoffs. And now here we are, where we're legitimately looking like if they're going to make the playoffs, this is going to be 2010 all over again, where it really could come down to the final game of the season. And that's with very, very, very optimistic, wishful thinking. We'll see how it shakes out. We will be back down at Wells Fargo Center, obviously, next weekend, next Saturday, when they take on the Devils. That's the Wayne Simmons night. Otherwise, we'll be back at some point later this week with a regular episode. I can hear my kids screaming in the other room, so I guess it's time for me to go. It's time for Ant to go and time for Bundy to go. Big thank you to everybody who checked out the show. And, do we want to address this, Ant, or no?
Not now.
Okay.
Let's address it next time.
Allison L. for the people in the podcast feed says, press Rocho next season, ? We have some thoughts. We'll bring them to you here on Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast. Thank you to everyone.
Silly
who checked
podcast.
That silly podcast.
We will talk to all of you later this week.